because after that initial burst of enthusiasm wears off, and also you might think you have a clear vision in your head, you will see how foggy it actually is until you try to outline. That's part of the benefit
It's
of
true.
outlining, is that it forces you to be thorough and ask the right questions.
All right. Well, we had some Hollywood magic happening around here, some technical fun, and between like the full technical meltdown of my machine, and now I pulled a card from my friend Yannick Silver's deck, and it says you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I thought, wow, how perfect is it that I'm talking to Sean, and he has this beautiful service where he ghost writes for business owners who so often end up pouring from an empty cup. Like they try to go, and if they don't get their footing with this expert positioning, with their message, and just like writing down the stories that matter, that's just one of those things that tends to get kicked down the road. So can you talk to me a little bit about what it's like to hire a ghostwriter versus, the standard thing that a lot of business owners do is I'll do it myself. I'll just make more hours in the day and I'll just do it. Like, obviously you're very talented at storytelling and writing, but like if somebody's thinking about going this direction, what might make it a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, I often by the time someone comes to me, they have tried to do it themselves. They've probably even worked with other ghostwriters that couldn't get them over the finish line. And I think that really comes down to identifying the heart of your story, which is, kind of what I've been talking about this whole time in different forms. But this is part of why that's so important, and it's part of why, actually, one of the first things I do, to give you a little bit of the process, is I have us write and agree on a book proposal, which is exactly what you would need if you were to go to a traditional publisher, which really you would technically you would submit that to a literary agent who decides if they want to represent you, and then they go to publishers. But ultimately, the whole idea of it is to justify why should the book exist, and there's a specific structure to it. The main thing is the outline, but there's even some more stuff beyond that. And the reason why nobody in like, even though I do work with an agency that handles the publishing stuff, it wasn't their idea to start doing that. That was all me, because I was like, I love this document because it keeps us honest. It forces us to ask the right questions about who this book is really for, what kind of book it is. And when you get really clear on those things, that alone creates such a surge of momentum that it becomes harder to not finish the book than to finish it. And it shocks me how many other people don't do that. Like, even other ghostwriters don't really do that step, or they do kind of like a halfway rusty version of it, where I'm like, no, I'm very methodical about that step, because if we don't if we don't do that step, we will pay for it later. Ask me how I know.
1,000,000%. I mean, like so much is coming up. I'm like, wow, you tend to finish how you start, right? So like if you start as a hot mess, then guess
Yeah.
where you're headed after that, right? But like I literally lit up when you said that, because you're the first person that I've talked to about this that like talks so enthusiastically about the proposal stage, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one of my mentors always says the best time to have a map is before you go into the woods. And
Yes.
it just strikes me that that is your map. That's like for a business, having a business plan, or even if you're very, shall we say, creative, and you're like, no, I don't want to be bound by the convention. I get it totally. And I've just noticed again and again, like when I'm doing like a campaign or a new program or something like that, I call it the master plan. And it is basically, like you said, it's the justification for all of the work that's about to occur.
Yeah, totally. And you will get this. So I don't bring this up in front of just anyone, but I think you'll vibe with this a lot. Is that I know I'm on the right track, where even just working on that proposal, there's like this spooky energy that starts happening, where it's like I feel like it's almost like there's like a living entity on the other side of it that I can feel talking to me through the document. And it's like, to me, that's like the spirit of the book. It's like starting to come through. And again, it's like, why would you skip that step? Like it's madness to me that anyone would, especially because if you can't get that like spooky feeling there on the proposal, you're not going to get it in the book. I promise you. right? So that's like the first acid test. And like I'm pretty good at finding it, like even in that stage. So and in that point, it's just I've never gone through that step and then had any kind of doubt going through the project. Like, oh, do we really have a book here? It's like, no, I know we do. I've already met the book.
Well, because you
Now we're just
predetermined
getting it
that.
written. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're making me think about like Stephen Covey. He was one of the first people that I read in personal growth and development. And he has this idea about when you create something, it's created, I think he says 3 times. So, by the way, dear listener, come at me if I've
Mm,
got that wrong. It has been a long time since I read those books. But the concept, right? It's like first you have the inception of the idea and you actually create it in your mind. You create this vision. Then you can create the plan and then you create the physical thing. And if you just realize like everything gets created 3 times, you don't have to fear that step of like what's your plan,
right.
right?
Right.
And speaking as a coach, I think the answer to your question is like, well, it's madness. Why would people not write down the plan? There's more and more I'm convinced that people don't plan because they don't want to be disappointed when the plan doesn't work out.
Which actually that's another huge piece of this I think is worth addressing is it is like even now, like I said, I'm working on my own book, and I will say I am applying every single tool I use on my clients to myself with exactly as much. I wrote my own book proposal, right? I even, as we'll get to in a second, there's like a little tool we'll talk about in a second. I use that on myself to figure out if what book I should even write. I mean, it's eye opening to me even taking my own medicine, because it's like, wow, this is really clarifying. It's also smashing through the fear and resistance I had for years, because this is not the first time anyone's ever asked me, like, Sean, when are you going to write a book, right? I've had people asking me that for years. And at every point, it was like, well, I don't know what to write about, all the usual stuff, right? But even beyond that, it was like, if we go even further back, when I was an attempted novelist, I did go through and just start writing. And that's part of how I learned, don't do that. Because after that initial burst of enthusiasm wears off, and also you might think you have a clear vision in your head, you will see how foggy it actually is until you try to outline. That's part of the benefit
It's
of
true.
outlining, is that it forces you to be thorough and ask the right questions. And then you actually will have clarity once you answer those questions. But until you do that, until when it's like, and it's just a glimmer in your eye, good luck. There's all kinds of ways that can go awry. I'd rather know in advance what those are. And I think
Well, and I
you're
think
so
I love
right.
that. Writing the proposal is like it's a lower stakes project, right? I can't recall
Yes.
exactly how many words are in a book, but like if you're sitting down to 50,000, 75,000 words versus a book proposal, and I understand you might have a little something that you want to share with the audience today that kind of gets them on the path of thinking like this. You mind telling us about that?
Yeah, so this is a tool I created called the Book Clarity Engine. And what it is it's a custom GPT that I built with a very specific set of rules on the back end that are designed to guide you through a 30 to 60-minute session that answers, should I write a book? And what kind of book? And you'll either get a green light, yes, go ahead, write it now. Yellow light, yes, with some important modifications. Or red light, don't do it. Don't waste your time. And this thing, I mean, everyone I've run through the thing so far, myself included, all agreed that it's amazing. Just using this tool is so eye opening, and also it is brutal. It is going to kick your butt and make sure that you're actually telling the real story. And that's the thing, is like what inspired that was, as I kept having conversations with prospects, I realized so many of them are either they've kind of started on the wrong book, and I'm having to kind of catch them and yank them over midstream, be like, yeah, you really should be doing this over here. Or the fear they have of even getting started is completely legitimate, because their fear is, I'm going to start writing, I'm going to get lost somewhere in the middle, and then it's just a bunch of wasted time and energy, which, if you're a successful business owner, are not things you have in spades. So I completely get that. And in fact, that's why I created this tool, to give you that clear answer. Because and again, this is what I keep saying when people have gone through it, is not only is it the clarity of like, yes, go ahead and write this. This is a viable book. It should be so exciting that you can't help but to want to take the next step. That's really what this tool is designed for, is that this thing is screaming at you, like, write me now. I deserve to exist. Let's do it, right? If you don't get to that point, then don't start a book. Why would you ever, right? Like, the
Right.
world
That's a
doesn't
lot
need,
of work.
yeah, it is. Even
Goodness.
with a ghostwriter, right? Like, because we're still gonna have to. I mean, I do a lot less interview time than other ghostwriters do, but still, like, it is gonna take effort. You are gonna have to go through revisions with me, just for, like, little fact checking, things like that. But ultimately, like, I want to make sure the time is well spent for you, right? For both of us, and that's where this tool comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's incredible. Sean, like if people wanted to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
The easiest way is just to connect with me on Facebook. I post there all the time. I'm super active. I do answer my DMs, and it is actually me, not a VA. So yeah, easiest way to contact me is right there.
Amazing, amazing. And if they connect with you, is there like a keyword or something that you'd like them to use so that you can send them this GPT?
Amanda, just say Amanda, and I'll know.
All right. Very good. Well, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been so much fun.
Appreciate you. And dear listener, don't forget, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you do so that you don't miss another episode. And we've got all of the links and all the ways you can follow Sean in the show notes below. And by the way, if you love this and you have a friend who has been, maybe they're the friend that you're like, hey, friend, you should write a book. Maybe they should listen to this episode first. So go ahead and grab the link
Yes,
and share it with
please.
at least 3 of your friends so that they can benefit from it. And then finally, if you're just loving what we're doing here at the show, one of the best things you can do for us is leave us an honest review. So when you leave that review, it helps people to decide, do I want to spend my precious commute or my precious morning walk listening to this show? That review, it's 2 minutes for you and it is so tremendously valuable for us. So thank you so much for everyone who has left us a review. We're going to be back with another episode very shortly, but until then, make sure you do what matters.